Good evening. Welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. My name is Dan Derry, and I'm the president of the Institute of Fulfilled Eschatology. Hey, we're in the middle of a study of Matthew 16, 27, and 28, and we are demonstrating from this passage a first century fulfillment of the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't have time to rehearse everything we've looked at up to this point, but we are going to take another look at the time and a half a time in Daniel 7, which, by the way, remember, is the source for Matthew 16, 27, and 28. And we're going to look at Daniel 7 and Daniel 12, and we're going to identify the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 16 as his coming in AD 70 at the time of Israel's Great Tribulation. Now watch this. Go with me to Daniel 7 and open your Bible as well to Daniel 12. I want to look at a parallel study concerning the time and a half a time. And by the way, I will upload a PDF chart based upon these parallels so you can get a good visual of what we're seeing here. Now watch this. Watch the thematic parallels between Daniel 7, Daniel 12 concerning the time and a half a time. And remember, the Son of Man in Daniel 7 would come at just following the persecution of the saints for a time, half a time. Now watch this. Daniel 7 concerns Israel's last days. Now I understand the last days aren't mentioned in Daniel 7, but no one denies that Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 are parallel, okay? Daniel 7 is a reiteration of Daniel 2. And in Daniel 2:28, Daniel tells Nebuchadnezzar concerning his dream, which is explained in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, that his dream concerns the last days. Therefore, Daniel 7 concerns the last days, specifically Israel's last days. We see that parallel in Daniel 12. But in Daniel 12, it is called the time of the end. That's Daniel 12, 4, 9, and 13. In Daniel 7, this is the time of the judgment and resurrection. That's Daniel 7, 9 through 10, and 22, verse 27. And in Daniel 12, it is also the time of judgment and resurrection. Daniel 12, 1 through 3, verse 7 and 13. And in Daniel 7, verses 21 and 25, this is the time when the saints are worn down and overpowered. We see that exact same theme in Daniel 12, verse 1 and 7. It is the time of Israel's great distress when the power of the holy people are completely shattered. And finally, in Daniel 7, this time when the saints are worn down and overpowered would be for a time and a half a time. Daniel 7, verse 25. We see that exactly in Daniel 12, verse 7. This shattering of the holy people would be accomplished following the time and a half a time. Now, here's what's important. The time and a half a time in Daniel 12 and Daniel 7 are parallel. They are the same 3.5 year period of persecution of Jerusalem. And at the end of that persecution, the end of the time and a half a time, would be the coming of the Son of Man, Daniel 7. But watch this. Jesus identifies in Matthew 24 this time and a half a time as the Great Tribulation. Watch this. Remember, in Daniel 12, verse 1, this is what Daniel says. Now, at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard of your people, the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of great distress, such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. I'll stop right there. Now, this time of great distress is the persecution for a time, half a time. But Jesus in Matthew 24, verse 21, quotes Daniel 12, 1 verbatim and identifies that time and a half a time of great distress as Israel's great tribulation. Matthew 24, 21, listen. For then will be great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. That means that Daniel's time and a half a time is Israel's great tribulation. And Jesus placed its fulfillment within the lifetime of his first century generation. What does that mean? That means the time of the coming of the Son of Man in Daniel 7, just following the great tribulation, takes place at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, in Jesus' generation. And by the way, that's exactly what Jesus said in Matthew 24, verse 30. You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven in power and great glory. That's Daniel 7 and Matthew 16, 27 and 28. And Jesus placed its fulfillment within the lifetime of his first century generation. But watch this. This gets even more specific. Jesus in Luke 21 identifies the time of identifies the Great Tribulation, which is the distress of time and a half time of Daniel 7 and Daniel 12, as the time of Israel's judgment at the surrounding of Jerusalem by armies in AD 70. In Luke 21, verse 20, it says this: "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near." Verse 22, "Because these are the days of vengeance, so that all things written will be fulfilled." The time of the Great Tribulation, which is the time of Israel's distress for a time, half a time, was the days of vengeance when Jerusalem was surrounded by the Roman armies and destroyed in AD 70. That means that the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 16, 27 and 28, and Daniel 7 was fulfilled. It was fully accomplished in AD 70 at the days of vengeance when God took vengeance upon his enemies, Old Covenant Jerusalem. And by the way, that's exactly what we see again in Luke 21. Jesus promised his generation will not pass away until all these things take place. As we've seen, the coming of the Son of Man in Daniel 7 and Matthew 16, 27 and 28 could not have been fulfilled at any time prior to the fall of Jerusalem. But according to Jesus, it was fulfilled specifically at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And as we'll see next, this was the final eschatological second coming of Christ, which Jesus himself promised to be fulfilled in his lifetime. We'll see you next time on Answers on Eschatology. Be sure to check out the PDF on my website concerning this study. God bless. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.